Which players are seeing their fantasy value skyrocket in Dynasty leagues? We're about to tell you. Welcome back to the Fantasy Endgame. I'm Pierre. He's Chris. We're here to break down some players that are risers in Dynasty for the 2023 offseason. Let's start with a running back. Look, always tricky to trust veteran running backs in Dynasty, but I think it's safe to say that Cam Akers is clearly back on the rise after falling hard last year.
Yes, no doubt about it. Kind of like both sides of the fence after he tore his Achilles. There were the believers who went out, traded for him, gave up draft capital, gave up, whatever they had to get him. And then there were the other ones, like me, who said, sell him while you can, get rid of this guy. But he showed at the end of the season here that maybe his value in Dynasty isn't completely gone yet, because he looked good down the stretch. Had some nice games for the Rams, was basically the lead workhorse back for this offense. I know there's some uncertainty in this offense, but Cam Akers is still a very young running back. One, I guess, sort of benefit of tearing his Achilles is he has very few touches, doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him, now has a full offseason to get even healthier. Looked like he kind of sort of had that explosion back. I don't think Cam Akers, is a back into maybe top 10, top 15, maybe top 20 Dynasty running back, but the fact that he has value and that he is looking good again, and I certainly think if you went out and traded for him or if you've been holding him, you should be feeling pretty good heading into 2023.
Despite the fact he's been around 3 years, only 338 carries under his belt. So I guess one positive side effect of being hurt, he's clearly healthy now. Finished the season with 3 straight 100-yard rushing efforts. That's what you want to see, especially when, look, there was really not much passing game to really worry about. You knew the Rams were going to just run the ball, and he was still effective. I'm believing in him, and I'm definitely holding or trying to buy in Dynasty if possible. All right, now, is it possible for a player who hasn't yet taken a snap in the NFL to be a riser? I think so. Let's talk about Bijan Robinson, who is clearly going to be the number one rookie running back. Is he a guy who's even going to exceed expectations?
I think he will. I mean, we're talking about the best running back prospect probably since Saquon Barkley. I've seen people out there say, we don't even know where he's going to play yet. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter. We were saying last year about Breece Hall, we don't care. Wherever he gets drafted, we don't care. Top 10 running back. He went to the Jets. People were worried about Michael Carter holding him back. And sure, it took a few weeks. But once Breece Hall took over, he was off and running. Unfortunately, had that ACL injury. But I think we all know Breece Hall was going to absolutely smash this year. And Bijan is better than Breece Hall. He just is. He's a better prospect in every way than Breece Hall. And that's not a knock on Breece Hall at all, because Breece Hall is great. That's just how good Bijan Robinson is. This guy is as close as you can get to a can't miss. Don't talk to me about where he gets drafted. Don't talk to me about, who's ahead of him, what crusty veteran is ahead of him. I do not care. He's going to go to a team, wherever it is, and take over that backfield and be an absolute monster in fantasy and in Dynasty for many, many years. To me, Bijan Robinson is the number one pick. Even in Superflex formats, I believe that Bijan Robinson is the number one rookie pick.
Some other things that you should not care about, whatever his 40 time is at the combine or pro day or whatever, how many reps he does on the bench, what some evaluator says trying to pick apart weaknesses in his game, team he falls to, it does not matter. Wherever this guy goes, don't let your evaluation be shaken of him. It should be that he's the top rookie running back and that he will be a stud in fantasy. Now let's talk about a wide receiver that you haven't thought about in a minute or precisely for an entire season, because Calvin Ridley did not play last season, but he will be back in 2023. Now that he's going to be a Jacksonville Jaguar, is Ridley someone who really can shoot back up to its previous level?
I don't see why not. He's not coming off a major injury. He's coming off a ridiculous year-long suspension for gambling. I mean, relatively in his prime. I think he's going to be 28 this year. He's going to a better situation than he was in Atlanta, because he's going to Trevor Lawrence, who's going to enter year 3, who's a great elite prospect who looked great down the stretch here and will likely be even better next year. This offense was great. Christian Kirk, he's fine. He's good. Zay Jones, his time in the sun is probably done. You got to think Calvin Ridley is stepping in as the alpha, as the number one wide receiver. This was a top 10, top 5 fantasy wide receiver, before his mental breakdown and then his suspension. I don't see any reason why he's not back to that. Definitely a great buy low candidate this offseason if you can.
It is worth it. This guy has been a stud. Remember his last full season that he played, 1,374 receiving yards, and that was with Matt Ryan at quarterback. And now he's got a young rising star in Trevor Lawrence. And I think in that situation, this is a good team now, an actual playoff team. Doug Peterson at coach brings some stability there. I'm not too worried about Ridley. Sure, there is some risk. There's always risk, but name an NFL player where there's zero risk. Ridley's definitely worth acquiring on the cheap if you can. And if you've been stashing him, hold tight. Now let's talk about Trevor Lawrence some more. He's a guy that is skyrocketing in terms of quarterbacks, but in Dynasty, I think he's clearly the guy you should be most interested in. Is he a true franchise quarterback in fantasy?
Absolutely. And if you drafted him, in your rookie draft in 2021 and held him through that terrible season and held him through the offseason and didn't trade him away, didn't sell him low, or on the other side, if you did go out and buy low on him in the offseason last year, from a panicked manager who thought maybe he wasn't going to be that guy, you're feeling great right now because he looks like that guy. He looks like the guy that was the consensus #1 pick, generational talent at QB. He just had to get away from that other guy named Urban Meyer who almost ruined him. Had to like what you saw in the second half here. Had to love the development you saw. Doug Peterson has always been one of those guys who can help quarterbacks. He's a great coach for quarterbacks. This is an offense on the rise. We already talked about Calvin Ridley. Christian Kirk still young. Travis Etienne stayed healthy all year. Evan Engram still pretty young. He's got a lot of weapons around him. You've got to feel great. This is a guy who can be the cornerstone, QB1 for your franchise for 10 plus years going forward.
Most people just go crazy for youth, and then some people think it's basically a competition to see who has the youngest team or the most exciting rookies. It's about winning. So yes, these young players could develop into superstars, and this quarterback class for 23 is supposed to be elite, far better than what we've just seen. I love Bryce Young as a prospect. CJ Stroud, I think will be great. After that, there are question marks, for me at least, with at least most of the other guys that are left. You're going to take a chance on a rookie or a guy who is already there. Trevor Lawrence is 23. So to gain an edge, in age, maybe a year or two, I'll take the guy who I already know is a QB1 for fantasy and will be for years to come. And by the way, remember how we mentioned Calvin Ridley? Yeah, now he gets Calvin Ridley in addition to what he already has. So Lawrence already sold on, no questions here. That's our take on Dynasty players who are skyrocketing. Don't forget, in redraft, we got you covered with every position. Check out our running back video on some backs that we think are shooting up draft boards.